Well, here we go again, guys. More questions, more answers. So let's jump right into this. First question is, what are your thoughts on using climbing tree stands? I hunt with a bow 10 to 20 yards away from the bait. Can the bears pattern me based on whether my tree stand is at the ground level or up in the tree? I had one come in crosswind, stood up and looked at the base of my tree and then walked off and disappeared. So I have not used portable tree stands very much, but I know that people who do a lot will often just leave the stand attached to the base of the tree and then come back and use it to go up and down. The question basically is, can the bears figure that part of it out? I don't really have a lot to say about that because I haven't used it very much, but I think because bears are really curious, it could be a problem leaving your stand at the base of the tree like that, because the bears are likely to chew it up, bother it in some way, which is not going to be good for you, might even be unsafe. Whether it's going to matter to them whether they can see this stand there, I suppose there are some bears that are pretty skittish to the point where anything that's a little different about the surroundings might make a difference to them. I've seen some bears that don't seem to mind when you put a pop-up blind 20 yards away, and others that when you put a ground blind up 20 yards away, they just like, nah, we ain't buying this. The biggest issue I think with climbing tree stands and bear hunting is that it's really hard to get up the tree without making a lot of noise, and bears can be really close. I mean, within 100 yards maybe. It's a struggle to get a climbing stand up a tree quietly. So I would say that's the biggest issue, is the potential for not being able to get in your stand with a high degree of stealth, which is what I always am shooting for. Question number 2, what is the reasoning behind the Minnesota DNR not having a spring bear hunt? I've sent numerous emails requesting answers to this question, but I never get a straightforward answer. The best answer that I've got is that their population is too low. I disagree with that and have asked them to explain the data. Okay, so you're not the only one that disagrees with the belief that the bear population is too low in Minnesota. I'll tell you that right now. There's a lot of really frustrated hunters out there who think the bear population would warrant a lot more tags than we're getting right now. And that's almost universal among hunters. So why don't they have a spring bear hunt? I think it's probably the extra work involved and just the fact that it's a major change from the history of bear hunting since the first bear hunting seasons. It would be fun to have a spring bear hunt for sure. I don't think that I would guide in the spring just because I don't have time in the spring, but I just don't think you'll ever see it because it's just too much of a departure from the traditional bear hunting that we do in Minnesota. As far as the population or the number of tags, you could certainly just take tags away from the fall season and put them in the spring season, but yeah, it's just too much change, so I don't think you'll be able to put enough pressure on the DNR to have a spring bear hunt in Minnesota. When the winter is mild and there's little snow like we had here in Michigan, are wolves able to kill more bears during the winter? So we had low snowfall all through the bear habitat of the upper Midwest in Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Michigan this year. Bears were out moving around, and I have heard of quite a bit of depredation by wolves that killed bears, drug them from their dens. Whether it's higher than usual, I can't say for sure, but it would stand to reason that the bears would be easier to access if they're in a den where there's not a lot of deep snow around it and the wolves can get around better, and maybe it would be easier for them to find the dens. So I can't say with any definitive conclusion, but it seems to me like that's a possibility that the wolves would be able to get access to killing bears and pulling cubs out of the dens and so forth. They do that. They don't do it a lot. But the other side of that coin is if there is heavy, deep snow and the deer tend to really yard up, then the wolves have a lot more access to easy feed by killing deer. So would they be hungrier if there's not much snow? I don't know. There's other small mammals that might be easier to access, like rabbits and things like that. So it's a wash, I would say. I don't know. It's hard to say. I don't think I'm the only one that would really like to know the answer to that, and I would like to know how prevalent this problem is of wolves killing bears in the dens. Every year I hear more and more about it, and more anecdotal evidence and more proof that it's happened, with people sending me pictures, and I don't know how big of a problem it is, but it's certainly something that we need to research. Should I book a hunt the first week or the second week in Minnesota? This is a great question, because I've got hunters that are going to draw tags this year that are going to come to my bear camp, and most of them want to hunt the first week, and I've got to try to get some of them to hunt the second week. Absolutely convinced that there is really no difference between the first week and the second week, and most people hear that the vast majority of bears are killed the first week in Minnesota, which is true. Some years it's up to 80% are killed the first week. Usually it's 50 to 60%, so that it motivates people to want to be in bear camp the first week. But there's another side to this, and as a lot of these bears are being killed the first week, then people stop baiting. We often have more bears on the baits the second week for two reasons. Number one, they're starting to get the acorns cleaned up, which typically are on the ground and are the major food source during that first week of season. And in Minnesota, by the way, it starts September 1st every year. So they're starting to get the acorns cleaned up, and then the fact is that a lot of the other baiters in the woods are no longer baiting, and so some of the bears that were using their baits are finding our baits. So in our bear camp, we always have some baits for the people that are coming the second week that we don't hunt the first week, just so they have that kind of confidence. But we also have some baits that are good the first week, and we even kill a bear or two off of them the first week, and they just keep getting better. There's a lot of good, valuable reasons to hunt the second week, just as many as there are the first week. Okay, why do some bears do a death moan and some do not? This is a question that I have asked myself a lot, and I have tried to figure it out by watching videos, and I've killed 40 bears myself, and some of them death moaned and some of them didn't, and I've just tried to figure out based on shot placement. Like, this bear was heart shot and it did a death moan, and this bear was lung shot, didn't do a death moan, but this bear was heart shot and it didn't do a death moan, and this one was lung shot and it did. And honestly, I can find no relation at this point, anything that I can really point to and say, see, that's the difference. And so the answer to this question is I just don't know. I really don't know why some do it and some don't. Is it have something to do with the size of the bear or the position that they fell in? Who knows? But I do know this, that I'm working on this, and I've teamed up with a guy by the name of Brian Johnson. He calls himself the anatomy hunter, and he probably knows more about the actual anatomy and how a broadhead and an arrow kills a game animal than just about anybody else alive. And he started a company called the Anatomy Hunter, where he's doing scientific research into the actual way that an arrow going through both lungs actually kills an animal, and where you should shoot a bear, and how big the ribs are, and the differences between fixed blade broadheads and mechanical broadheads. And he's doing all kinds of research on bears, on deer, on big game animals other than bear and deer. And also right now he's in Georgia as I'm doing this, he's doing research on hogs, and doing a hunt in Georgia where they're shooting a bunch of hogs with arrows and dissecting them, taking them apart. And so one of the things that we're looking at together is, why do some bears do a death moan and some do not? And we are actually doing a hunt next month in Atikokan, Ontario, where there's 3 of us are going to shoot 3 bears, and then we're going to really look at the arrow path as it went through the animal and really define exactly what happened, how long the bear survived after the shot, and all things like that. I'm going to bring you videos on that. So we're going to try to get to the bottom of this issue of why do bears do a death moan. And but at this time, the only answer I have for this question is I don't know. So anyway, hopefully that's been helpful to you. A lot of good stuff in here. Keep the questions coming, and we'll see you on the next video.